Hello students, today we are going to discuss an important form of poetry, that is epic. It is a long poem that describes the heroic deeds of the heroes, and it also speaks about the ethos of the milieu. When the word epic is used in literal sense, it encompasses both oral as well as written. Homer's The Iliad and the Odyssey can be considered as best examples. Since poetry came into light before prose and as all written forms generated from the oral tradition, epic also saw its birth from oral tradition. Thus, epic poetry is used all over the world in different ages and centuries to communicate the heroic deeds of their cultural heroes. Thus, epic in a way is synonymous with heroic oral poetry. Dante's Divine Comedy, Beowulf and Gilgamesh are considered to be the greatest epics even today. Thus, epic poetry occupies an important place in English literature even today. The word epic is derived from ancient Greek epos, which means word story. In an article reporting from North Vietnam in the Sunday Times for 21st July 1968, Mary McCarthy described war as the defense of their land has the quality of an epic, that is, of a work of art surpassing the dimensions of realism. Ezra Pound in his ABC of Reading offers a very simple definition. An epic is a poem including history. If these two phrases, surpassing the dimensions of realism and including history, can be treated as two poles that describe an epic. Thus, epic's double relationship to history on the one hand and to everyday reality on the other indicates two most important functions of an epic. It is an essential record of customs and traditions and also a storybook for entertainment. Tacitus, in his study of Germany, noted that the Germanic tribes celebrate the founders of the tribe in ancient songs, a kind of folk memory available to them. This is seen very clearly in a well-known passage from Odyssey, where the Demodocus sings as Odysseus in disguise requests him to sing the story of the Trojan horse, in which Odysseus played an important part. The hero is so moved by the bard's recitation that he weeps and reveals his identity. Thus, an epic can be described as a long narrative poem that discusses the deeds of great and courageous heroes. Its style is grand and elevated. Let us move on to the next module, that is characteristics of epic. Epic centers on men, however, not on ordinary men, but on exceptional men, none less than human. The hero is an impressive and grand person of national or international repute, historical or legendary importance. The brilliant focus on the central character enhances the grandeur and universality of many great epics. Many heroes lived before Agamemnon, but all of them, unknown, unmourned, have slipped into dark oblivion because no poet praised them. Quoted from Paul Merchant. The epic need not be long, as many are, but it should be large in scale and vast, covering many nations, world, or the universe. All actions described in the epic are actions of great courage that actually demand superhuman courage. Gods, angels and demons intervene from time to time in various actions and events that appear in the epic. The central theme of the epic need not be complex. For instance, Homer's Odyssey germinates from a quarrel between Odysseus and Achilles. The Iliad also begins with a similar quarrel. Epic is generally considered to be a simple one with high quality that deals with high seriousness. The second characteristic of an epic is its ability to deal with more facets of life. The third requirement is accidental connection of all the episodes in the epic. Apart from the above mentioned characteristics, there are few common conventions that almost all epic poets follow. The poet invokes a muse and to inspire and guide him in completing the work. The following is an invocation to the muse from the Odyssey. Tell me, muse, of the man of many ways who was driven far journeys after he had sacked Troy's sacred citadel. The Old English Beowulf is about the passing of the old heroes, and the poet introduces the theme so clearly and simply in the opening lines. Yes, we have heard the greatness of the Danish kings in old days, how the heroes did courageous deeds, as quoted in Paul Merchant. An epic poet opens a narrative in media res, in the midst of things, and uses flashback techniques to give necessary description of earlier events of the epic. An epic is generally considered to be a repertoire of epic similes. Here is an example of an epic simile from the Odyssey. I drove my weight on it from above and bore it home like a shipwright bores her beam, with a shipwright's drill that men below, whipping the strap back and forth. Whirl and the drill keeps twisting, never stopping. So we seized our stake with it, fiery trip, and bored it round and round in the giant's eye. The hero of the epic or the main character generally gives lengthy and extended speeches. Then a great wave took him on the rough coast, where his skin would have been flayed, his bones broken. But Pallas Athena put this plan in his head. He gripped the rock with both hands and held on, and hung there, groaning as a great wave passed over. Let us now understand what are the different types of epic. The first and the foremost one is primary or oral or primitive folk epic. Primary epics also deal with a heroic figure, sometimes even with superhuman powers. They also speak about death-defying journeys, many misadventures, supernatural forces that shapes actions and conflicts, either in the form of battles or other physical struggle. The poet uses long passages and speeches and provides vivid and clear description of various actions in a lofty tone. Epic similes are also used to the greatest extent possible. Ordinary events are also described, but they serve as background information to the epic, and they are also described in a lofty tone by the poet. In oral compositions, the poet or the singer renders the heroic deeds of the hero with the accompaniment of a harp or a lyre. Thus, the epic hero's eminence is directly related with that of his bard. Nevertheless, the bard's quality rests on his ability to concentrate on his subject. However, the important elements in the plot of the traditional story cannot be altered, but an exceptionally and gifted bard can always mold his material in both complicated as well as in an interesting manner. Famous Odysseus' bard pronounces, "You will regret it afterwards if you kill a bard, the singer, for gods and men. I am self-taught, and God planted in my heart the various ways of a song." Thus, Homer uses the word self-taught to indicate high degree of awareness of various techniques the poet possesses. The oral poets had vast number of plots that belonged to the epic. They were prepared with any of those plots to narrate in their own words. The poet never gave unimportant details to their audience. For instance, Homer's Iliad ends before the sack of Troy, whereas the Odyssey begins after this. In the Iliad, the poet gives more importance to the connection of Odysseus with the Trojan horse as an important part of background information. He gives little importance to the fall of Troy in the epic. The oral poets used repetitions skillfully, which are also called as formulae. The oral poets used their knowledge of the plots and themes with great precision and exactness and with economy. Homeric hexameter or the dactylic hexameter and the Anglo-Saxon alliterative created great strain on the minds of the oral poets, and hence, whenever they came across a phrase that suited his metrical scheme and is pleasing, he memorized it and used it again and again. In course of time, it became formulaic and the poet used it till he came across another phrase that fit his metrical scheme. Thus, the poet had vast store of phrases that were designed exclusively for a particular place in the line. These phrases remained uncontested for many centuries. Let us understand the secondary epic or literary epic. While oral epics are composed orally and recited, the secondary epic is a literary work of art. Annals, written in 18 books by Nevius and Ennius, is considered as a real beginning in the field of secondary epic in classical literature. But unfortunately, no records exist. In fact, Ennius was called the father of Latin poetry. Thus, Virgil's Aeneid is considered to be the first and the masterpiece among literary epics. Apart from possessing the same qualities of an oral epic, the secondary epic is considered to be choric in character, as pointed out by Professor E.M.W. Tilliard. According to him, without any exception, oral or literary, epic poetry is generally considered to be national poetry or public poetry, as the poet acts as a spokesperson to the collective thoughts of large group of members or a community. For instance, Dante is the chief spokesperson for the whole of medieval Christianity in his Divine Comedy, and Milton for English Protestants in his Paradise Lost. Let us understand what is the new form of the epic. Dante can be called as a revolutionary poet for his revolutionary new style and use of love as a central or main theme in his work Divina Commedia or Divine Comedy, as it is popularly known. Dante's first canzone, Ladies, you who have knowledge of love, is a poetic description of Beatrice in the form of an address to her friends, brought immediate success to him. Dante's reply to Bonaguinta, one of his competitors, is interesting. I quote, Dante says, I am a man who takes note. When love inspires me, and as he dictates, this is the way that I write. Divine Comedy is not exclusively a philosophical poem. The subject matter is also not single-handed as it appears to be. Close look at the first 3 lines of the poem help us to understand its poetical power. In the middle of our lives road, I came to myself in a dark wood, where the straight way had disappeared. The first line speaks about the poet's age, that is 35, half of the 70 years and 10. The second line sets the base for many tales like, suddenly the night came through a dark forest. The third line speaks of the hero's deviated path from the straight one, and the words used in the third line float between pure narrative and religious allegory. Only after the 3 lines it is clear to the reader that this is a new kind of work, the earliest epic written in the first person. The central character of Dante's Divine Comedy is his soul, and the theme of the epic is a soul's journey towards divine love. The story is set on a vast canvas of life. The poem begins in the middle way of our life, then moves to Inferno, Purgatory, and to the Paradise finally. The poet rises through the 10 heavens to reach the divine love in the final canto. This big notion is possible because the readers easily identify Dante as a central character, and more so the central theme of the work, that is love. Dante's work provided a great turning point to other writers like William Langland and Chaucer. Langland's vision of Piers Plowman deals with the life of England in the 1360s with vivid details, with Plowman as a hero who becomes a Christ figure by the end of the poem. Explicitly, it is not an epic, but it is an important contribution to the long poem in English. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales can be called as another major contribution to the tradition of long English poem. The poem is woven against large number of characters who are all going on a pilgrimage to Canterbury. During the journey, each pilgrim is expected to tell 2 pairs of stories to lure away their time. The result of such a condition is a long poem with a different oral tradition. The reader is reminded of Homer's epics, where the protagonists tell the story in long speeches, and the poet also incorporates a loose structure to make it convenient to accommodate various customs of the period. If Divine Comedy reflects Dante's changing emotions with that single binding vision in 1300, Canterbury Tales reflect Chaucer's short imaginary journey that began on that spring day in 1387. Piers the Plowman and Canterbury Tales cannot be placed strictly in the genre of epic, yet it is not irrelevant and exaggeration to equate Langland and Chaucer with Ovid and Dante in the tradition of the long and the open narrative. Epic can be simply defined as a great work of art that deals with the aspects of nationhood, community, and human spirit. In fact, these aspects of epic aroused great interest among Renaissance writers, and after several centuries of neglect, the epic became one of the best choices to talk about community and nationhood. Numerous writers like Boiardo, Ariosto, and Spenser made optimum utilization of the genre. For example, Boiardo's Orlando Innamorato, Ariosto's Orlando Furioso, Tasso's Gerusalemme Liberata, Spenser's Faerie Queene, and Milton's Paradise Lost are a few to name. Renaissance epics often include elaborate battles, funeral games, and in addition also included love and romance, focused their narratives on adventure, magic, disguise, and flight. Spenser owes a lot to Golding and Chapman. Chapman's straight talking with a convincing vigor actually brought the attention and appreciation in his age. Spenser religiously followed Chapman and his style. Chapman's translation of Iliad came 30 years after Golding's translation. Thus, Spenser's style of epic, the Faerie Queene, is smoother and not heavily accented. Thus, Faerie Queene is the first major work that combined both epic and romance very successfully. The title of the epic also gives a further hint. The Faerie Queene, written about 12 moral virtues, is an amalgamation of both romance, epitomized in the word fairy, and an epic as he follows the Virgilian 12-book structure. The 12 moral virtues gives us the next clue. They are neither epic nor romance. Ariosto's poem Orlando Furioso deals with the original Roland as its hero, but it is completely altered. Between the Song of Roland and Orlando Furioso, the French romances of gallantry and courtly love, the Arthurian legends, were adapted to the newly defined love and honor. Boiardo, an Italian poet, organized his work Orlando Innamorato on the lines of Dante's cantos. Let us understand what a canto is. A canto is a unit of length and an amount of poem an oral poet can sing in one evening. Thus, the term canto transferred from the Italian into the language of epic, which was adopted by many great writers like Spenser. Spenser was the first poet to adopt cantos as standard subdivision. Thus, epic underwent series of changes during the Renaissance period. Spenser's The Fairy Queen is a beautiful and a clever blend of liveliness and largeness of thought and surprising lyricism with complex allegory. As an epic, it is the pinnacle of the chivalric tradition of the Chaucer the Just and the essential point in English tradition of translation which is still alive. Milton in his Paradise Lost consciously emulates earlier epic writers. He follows his ancient predecessors like Homer and Virgil. He also takes inspiration in form from the medieval and the Renaissance poets like Dante, Tasso, Ariosto and Spenser. Hence, Paradise Lost features many classical and Renaissance epic features. Like any other epic, Paradise Lost also opens with the invocation of the muse. Milton invokes the Holy Spirit, his muse, of man's first disobedience and the fruit of the forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat. Sing, heavenly muse, that on the secret top. The epic poet states his theme in the beginning lines, and Paradise Lost is no exception. The subject of the epic is Adam and Eve's disobedience to God and fall from his grace, which is clearly understood in the beginning lines. Paradise Lost begins in media res like any other classical epic, and the poet uses flashback technique to talk about previous crucial events in the background. The actions of both Adam and Eve in the beginning and that of Satan's and other fallen angels the poet describes later are actions that actually require and demand great courage. The whole epic revolves around gods, angels and demons who constantly intervene from time to time in various actions and events in the epic. Saturn, Milton's hero in the epic, often gives long speeches while addressing other fallen angels. For instance, he finds Beelzebub lying beside him. Saturn notices change in him and addresses him to instill courage. What though the field be lost, all is not lost, the unconquerable will, and study of revenge, immortal hate, and courage never to submit or yield. And what is else not to be overcome? Milton's use of epic similes is also an important epic convention. He uses them to describe Saturn and his greatness as a hero. For instance, when Saturn is lying on the burning lake, Milton compares him with the Titans who waged a war on Jove in Greek mythology. Next, he compares him to Leviathan, or a whale that is so enormous in size that the sailors mistake it for an island to fix the anchor. Thus, after a thorough analysis of the work, it is clearly understood that Paradise Lost has all the epic conventions. Eventually, Milton succeeded in his effort to write first epic in English. Let us conclude today's module, that is epic. Classical or modern, epic is an important medium of poetry to talk about many great themes and events in a lofty style. Epics incorporate diverse material and they perform a very critical work in the society. Epic heroes develop as they learn to face challenges and they use courage and cleverness to prosper, thus supplying the audience with psychological boost and morale. They are considered to be great role models in facing dangerous challenges to become successful. Epics are storehouses of social rules and perform didactic functions to upgrade the lives of people in the society. The epics also emphasize several values like honorable son, devotion and loyalty to family, selecting suitable mates and performing various rituals according to custom. In short, epics teach society's ethics. Hope you all understood the origin and the development of an important form of poetry, that is epic. See you all in the next class. Thank you.